Time to turn back the clock and look at what was considered a big development proposal that got a community up in arms. The site was a former Molson site near West 12th and Arbutus in Vancouver. The proposal was several 15-story buildings. From our vast CBC archives in 1992, here's the fight.
And you could say I'm trying to protect my own interest. Yes, that's true, I am. This is my home. Look at the people that have turned out tonight. Look at their response. They don't want this shoved down their throats.
This is the area in question, a roughly 9-block neighbourhood with light industry, such as warehouses and car maintenance shops, that stands side by side with family homes in the Arbutus area on Vancouver's west side. More than 2 years ago, City Council targeted this area for a redevelopment plan that would balance the concerns of existing residents and landowners with the city's future housing needs. The issue here is not so much a question of to build or not to build, but rather how high and how many. Both the city's planning department and the industry landowners are hoping for a plan that will combine several high-rises with some low-rise housing. The residents don't like the idea of their neighbourhood becoming host to several 15-story high-rises, and at a meeting last night in a Kitsilano secondary school, they were able to tell council what they definitely don't want.
I never could have dreamed when I put in an offer for my house that was so near the site that the planning department would even consider high-rises. I thought that had died out back in the 1970s in Kitsilano.
This whole process lacks vision.
But residents don't want the city's housing crisis to become their neighbourhood crisis.
We don't want towers in our neighbourhood. We don't want a West End type of density. We don't want too many units per acre, too many people living here. We don't want the problems that go with excessive kinds of urbanization.
Now, what was wrong with the whole process is they didn't understand they were in the middle of a neighbourhood, and that neighbourhood was made up of a lot of people who've been around a long time and have a little bit of toughness and a little bit of smarts going for them.
But this wasn't to be the last word. Over 100 people had signed up to speak last night, but only a handful got their chance. The meeting will resume at City Hall at the end of the month.
If you want to have a strong community, then you have to respect that community.
For the CBC Evening News, I'm Penina Block in Vancouver.
That fight was more than 30 years ago, but a lot of the arguments seem rather familiar. In 2017, CBC Vancouver did a story looking back at the fight and asked some city planners to reflect on big proposals. Brent Toderian told us then that proposals can sometimes be too big for the community, and quote, I actually think that the how big is too big question is probably the most important question in urban design in Vancouver today. We wanted to check in with Brent again and see how he feels now. He's in transit and he joins us from Pearson Airport. Brent, thanks for joining us. First of all, that quote from 2017, do you still agree?
It's a bit strange to hear that quote or read that quote, because I still agree there is still such a thing as how big is too big. It is still a key question, but even then, I felt like from an urban design perspective, we had to be prepared to stretch our comfort levels, because even then, we knew we were in a climate emergency. We knew we were in a housing emergency. We've always been in a housing emergency. That's what these stories illustrate. You keep going back, and there was a housing emergency then too. But I got to tell you, in the 7 years that have been between that and now, the understanding of the consequences of the climate emergency, the understanding of the consequences of the housing emergency and other emergencies too, public health emergencies, social equity and classism and racism emergencies, public infrastructure cost emergencies. The consequences of getting this wrong are just more obvious. So although we're hearing a lot of the same commentary about neighborhood change, neighborhood character, it's now being balanced even more responsibly, I think, frankly, against the critical need to go further and faster in the context of housing, smart housing, well-designed housing always. But frankly, we need more, we need faster, and we need it to help us with our climate footprint as well as our housing crisis. So the conversation has changed. And I look back at how we were feeling. Even for me, these were on my radar screens, but boy, I'd say it's ramped up significantly in the last 7 years.
It's understandable some people do not want to see their communities change either drastically or even a little bit, but do you think there's a changing tide against what we call the NIMBY movement?
Well, since then, we've had the growth of the unity movement, yes, in my backyard. And there's just sort of these clashing ideologies around growth and change. And I think both of them can have their weaknesses. I tend to talk about Quimby and not talking the mayor of The Simpsons. It's quality in my backyard. You're still, as much as we need density, as much as we need to stretch our comfort levels to achieve more housing that is badly needed and lower carbon footprint, et cetera, there is still a need to make sure it's as high quality as possible with excellent design, the amenities that make it work, emphasis on multimodal so we don't get a lot more cars as we're adding more people. So there's still a right way to do density. But frankly, we can't afford to be ideological perfectionists when it comes to the way we look at urban design and density, because frankly, we need more. And having a reluctance to do more and to challenge some of those issues around character and charm in neighborhoods is one of the reasons why our housing crisis has just gotten worse rather than actually been solved.
Brent Toderian, we appreciate your time and your perspective. Better trademark Quimbyism pretty quick. Safe travels.
My pleasure.